Today on a surprise episode of the 10-12 podcast, we've got Bobby from Scott and Holman podcast joining us so we can talk about Houston Cougar football, basketball, and who is Houston's actual rival. And Ben Golan of Red Raider Sports, Rivals site for Texas Tech, talks about what the Red Raiders are doing in the transfer portal, and it is impressive.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the 10-12, the podcast that covers all 16 teams in the Big 12 Conference. We are the flagship show, the 10-12 Network. Find every show on the network at 1012network.com. And of course, we are partners with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network. I'm your host, Phillip. Thank you for joining us for what is now our official last episode of the 2024 year. I know, I said we were done. And I was fine with that. And then there was all this hullabaloo about the college football playoff and the first round and the games not being close and Alabama and Ole Miss should have been there. And Texas Tech is cleaning up in the transfer portal in the way that they are. And there's these conversations going around about the Big 12 getting screwed by ranking services when it comes to transfer portal players and what they used to be ranked before they went into the portal and what they're ranked now because they're going to a Big 12 school. And, everything else like Utah fan accounts going after Kansas State when they got down to Rutgers because Utah fan accounts know the only way that a lot of them can get engagement is to trash the other Big 12 schools and get Big 12 fans mad at them, even though the good Utah accounts, Utah Utes Football Digest, our show in the 10-12 network, who is available on YouTube. Joseph does an incredible job and has been killing it this December with all of his breakdown of the transfer portal players. There was so much. I got itchy. And I just had to get back behind the mic and talk about things. I just had to. I couldn't stay away until mid-January. I like doing this. It was nice to just kind of spontaneously be like, hey, can you hop on the pod? Hey, can you hop on the pod? And if I got no's, then I knew it wasn't meant to be. But I got yeses. So we got two great guests. Ben Golan joining us from Red Raider Sports to talk about Texas Tech and the transfer portal, what they're doing. I'm buying stock in the Red Raiders already. I know it's December. We're not even into it's just way too early. We'll do some way too early stuff in January, but it's way too early, but I'm still buying stock. And it's been too long since we talked about Houston and had one of the guys from Scott and Holman on. So Bobby's going to join us. We're going to talk about Houston Cougar football, the men's basketball. Remember, conference play starts on Monday. Monday is the start of Big 12 men's basketball conference play. That's very exciting. And diverted into this conversation about who Houston's rival is, which led me to something I'm going to work on this offseason, which is actually talking to people who cover these teams to figure out who are their rivals now in the modern era of college athletics. Because I'm tired of trying to figure it out, and we all make assumptions and say who it should be. And I think even fans have differing opinions on who rivals are, and I may even have to start reworking this new idea into tier systems based on conference, non-conference, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But it's fun conversation. So, two great interviews coming up. 24. Great year. Excellent year. We added 2 new shows. The Forecast. Ralph Amsden is the host. Covers Arizona State. We've got the Utah Utes Football Digest. Joseph doing a great job over there on his YouTube channel. I'm not kidding. His December is killing it. Utah is so active in the portal and doing so much stuff, and he's popping out videos for all these players. I would go and watch his stuff. He's one of the Utah accounts. There's a reason we brought him in. Okay? That's what I'm going to say. And Ralph is awesome. Every time I've had Ralph on the show, he has absolutely killed it. So glad to have them. We are 3 schools shy of our 16-team podcast goal, 1 for every school. We don't have TCU. We've tried twice. It's failed. We'll figure it out at some point. And I still need Arizona and Colorado. And I think I'm close to offering a Colorado show. I think so. I think I'm close. I think so. I haven't wanted to do the business side of stuff lately. That's why I wanted to hop behind the mic, because it's fun. All this stuff, and we talk about it a bit with Ben about like the Big 12's getting screwed in the way rankings work as far as transfers go. The idea is that because a Texas player was a 4-star at Texas, and then he transferred out and is going to BYU, and now he's a 3-star player, and so fans are mad that the Big 12 is getting screwed because some of the metrics, especially ESPN stuff, plays in or takes into account player ratings into strength of schedule. And so if you're a Texas or an Ohio State or a team who gets a bunch of 4 and 5 stars out of high school and they stay 4 and 5s while they're at your school, then your strength of schedule for opponents is better because they're playing you loaded down with a great roster. But then these 4 and 5 star kids transfer and suddenly their rating drops when they enter the transfer portal and go to a BYU, and that has fans upset, which is fair to some extent. I think part of the problem is that now you're re-rating them because it's the first time you've had to evaluate them since they were in high school. And so it's fair to re-rate and reevaluate. And there's plenty of players who look at Texas Tech, were not 4 stars when they came out of high school and are 4 stars now in the transfer portal and are committing to other places. So I don't entirely buy the argument. I don't. I think it's looking at the whole thing from a very, very small vantage point and ignoring a lot of other things that go on. But like, I get the problem of, I don't think your roster rating should impact strength of schedule. Like, that's a problem. Well, they recruited a bunch of great players. Well, it doesn't mean that they're a great team. No, it does. It does, because they've got all this talent on their roster. Well, the kid was a 4-star out of high school. He's played 27 snaps in 2 years. Oh, well. Anywho. It's an interesting conversation to have this offseason, and I want to continue to have it with different people, especially those who cover recruiting, because I think it's something that needs to be evaluated beyond just the Big 12's getting screwed and there's a conspiracy. I don't know. It's the holidays, y'all. Like, enjoy yourself. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. Happy holidays. I can say happy holidays. It's okay. There's more than one going on right now. Happy New Year. All of it. I hope you all had a good time. My kids have a bounce house and they are obsessed with it, and it's awesome. I love Christmas time. I love the holidays. I'm enjoying the time with family. I hope you are as well. If you are someone who has a hard time during the holidays, you don't have a lot of family around, feel a little lonely, it happens. It's a real thing. The holidays are not always merry for everyone. If you're someone who's having a hard time, our DMs are open on Twitter, 1012 Network, 1012podcast@gmail.com is the email. Shoot us an email. Shoot us a DM. It's 1012pod at Threads and Instagram. It's 1012 Network on Bluesky. Reach out. I'm happy to chat about anything, sports related, life related, whatever. If you just need someone to talk to, I'm happy to do it. I would love to. I would love to. I would. Oh, yeah. Charlie Hustle, sponsor here of the podcast. I know I'm supposed to have a great segue. I'm just going to do this one real quick because, look, they got a bunch of stuff on sale. Sale is on sale. The sale stuff is on sale. They're up to 70% off, and there's a bunch of really, really good Big 12 stuff in there. We tweeted about it. There are some Kansas State sweatpants. There are some purple with logo Kansas State sweatpants. There are hoodies. There's basketball gear that is up to 70% off right now. We're in conference play, starts Monday. It's a perfect time to go buy basketball gear. So if you got money for Christmas you want to spend, maybe you got a Charlie Hustle gift card you want to spend, go. There's stuff on sale for Big 12 fans. It is absolutely awesome, and it's super comfortable. The sweaters, the hoodies are great. You're going to feel great wearing them, whether your team's winning or losing. If something's not on sale, you find something new drops and you want it and it's not available for sale right now, or the sale ends before you get over there for some reason because you don't go now, like now, use our promo code 101215, TEN1215, 15% off all non-sale items. 101215, 15% off all non-sale items. Shout out to Charlie Hustle. Loved having them as a sponsor this year. We're having conversations with them about what the next steps are for 2025. Having a lot of conversations about 2025 that I'll let y'all in on as soon as I know. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a ramble. Sorry, I got 2 great interviews. Happy New Year, everybody! I promise this is the last episode before 2025 gets here. So, enjoy it. I had fun recording it. Hope you like it. Thanks to everybody that's listened this year. And go Big 12. Look, everyone uses the transfer portal, right? Except for Clemson, although they did bring in 1 transfer as far as I know. Nobody's using it more this offseason than Texas Tech. And they have the best class in the country, according to both 247 and on three. So it's definitely something that we have to talk about, even though there's still a long way to go in this offseason before any roster is actually set. So joining us today to help kind of break down what Texas Tech is actually doing in the portal, Ben Golan from Texas Tech's rival site. Ben, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Phillip. Yeah, a lot of excitement in Lubbock, and they have a bowl game tonight, of course, but we're going to be talking more about the future and what comes next season. So, happy to get on here and break it down with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're happy to have you here. Again, Texas Tech right now, number one in the 2025 transfer football team rankings at both 247 and on three. They have 17 transfers in, which is tied for the most in the country, along with Ole Miss and Kansas. And I think there's a couple other teams as well. Why is Texas Tech putting such an emphasis on the transfer portal right now and bringing so many new players in for next season?
Yeah, good question. And I think this is kind of the plan. If you look at what the coaching staff has done the past couple years, just as far as like high school recruiting and stuff like that, the 2023 and the 2024 classes at Texas Tech were both ranked in the top 25. And so the plan was to get these really highly ranked high school classes and then let them grow up by year two, by year three, and then go into the 2025 season and really beef up with the transfer portal guys. So now you have all of these young kids who are growing up, these highly ranked recruits from the last couple of years, combined with all of this transfer portal talent that's coming in. And Texas Tech is really looking to make a run at a Big 12 championship next year. That's really the goal. They fell short of that this year. And so really, just being aggressive in the portal, and they've, added talent kind of everywhere. Every single position has been attacked. And, I think that was kind of the plan going in, and they've succeeded.
I'll note Rivals, the company that you work for, has Texas Tech third behind Ole
Yes.
Miss and LSU. Look, I'm not going to argue with those three schools. It seems like the consensus kind of top three as far as what all they're bringing in, not to mention the number of players they're bringing in. Where is Texas Tech's emphasis? You mentioned they're wanting to support all the talent that they have recruited out of high school. Joe McGuire has done an incredible job since he got there to Lubbock. I know that Texas Tech has used NIL really well in their recruiting pitches. They've got money for these players to have. They got money to spend. Where is the focus here for this class? Where is Texas Tech saying, here's where we can fill in gaps and holes out of the portal to take us from where we are to getting into Arlington come next December?
Yeah, I think any Texas Tech fan who's been watching won't be surprised by my answer, but it's up front, offensive and defensive lines. You look at the guys that they've brought in, we'll start offensive line. Howard Sampson, left tackle from North Carolina. He's a guy out of the Houston area, and he has 2 years left, but just a massive kid, 6'8", 325. And like I said, he was UNC starting left tackle this year. They added Will Jados from Miami of Ohio. Played left tackle, but will probably slide in at right tackle next season. Another 6'8" guy, 6'8", 310, and Hunter Zambrano from Illinois State, one of the highest ranked guys in the portal. Played tackle, but has also played guard. And so you look, they've brought in two tackles already. I just talked about, Zambrano at 6'5", most likely going to slide inside at guard. So like I said, any Texas Tech fan who watched games this season, the offensive line wasn't good enough. And, Joe McGuire has always been really big on, winning, you win up front, and that's how you win and lose games. And so they've really attacked the offensive line. And then defensive line, kind of the same story. I think, going into the offseason, if you had asked anyone who covers the Big 12, Lee Hunter would go from UCF to Texas Tech, then any Texas Tech fan would say, oh, that in alone would be like a huge win because he's an all Big 12 guy, has been really good in the Big 12 the past couple of years. But they don't just get Lee Hunter, they get Skylar Gill Howard from Northern Illinois, and then they also add Anthony Holmes from Houston. So that's really like three starting quality defensive linemen, interior guys that they've added. So really just beefing up the lines on both sides of the ball, and there's going to be a lot of expectations on those guys as well. That's the other thing that comes in with these high rankings is now they have to produce.
What is Texas Tech's pitch to these guys to get some of these players? It's not shocking. Let's all just have an honest conversation. If it's not shocking to see an Ole Miss and an LSU from the SEC with the money they have to spend, and we've seen Ole Miss the last 2 years with Lane Kiffin really be aggressive in the portal, be able to lure talent to their schools. This is not a shot at Texas Tech in any way, shape, or form. As I mentioned, they're using NIL well. Joey McGuire, from every interaction I've ever seen with him, the guy what you would love to spend time with and probably play for. But what is Texas Tech's pitch to these guys into the portal to get some of these highly talented, highly sought after recruits to come to Lubbock and come and commit to Texas Tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on two key things right there, both NIL and just the culture that Joey McGuire has built, and just the kind of need for these guys to come in. And Joey McGuire's pitch this year has really been uh, Texas Tech. If you look at the way the standings broke out, they were one win away from going to Arlington. They blew a 17-point lead at TCU. If they would have won that game, they would have been one of those. They would have tied for first and had some tiebreakers that would have allowed them to get in over Iowa State, I believe, to go to the Big 12 title game. So, really, just that's kind of been the pitch that hey, uh, as a program, Texas Tech was so close. We need you guys. We're going to obviously pay you guys well, NIL and all those things, but you're going to be the kind of pieces to take us, to that next level. And Joey McGuire and just the culture he's built and the type of recruiter he is, has been really successful with that pitch.
You talked about the guys they brought in on the offensive and defensive line. Who's maybe one of the commits they've gotten so far that isn't getting the buzz that fans haven't talked nearly as much about that you think can make a really big impact for Texas Tech next season?
Well, I wouldn't say he's not getting the buzz because honestly, all of these guys are getting the buzz.
Sure,
But
yeah.
but maybe one guy who I think has maybe somehow been underrated in all of this is Quentin Joyner, the running back from USC. Obviously, he comes from Manor High School, the same high school as Taj Brooks. They had that connection. Texas Tech was really looking for like a veteran running back to come in and replace and help replace Taj Brooks. They have two true freshmen this year, Jacoby Williams and Cameron Dickey, who they really like. But like I said, they were just looking for a vet to come in and, maybe push them next season. And then it was Quentin Joyner became available, and he's almost just too good that, you couldn't pass up on him. Former top 100 recruit out of high school. He has 3 years left, close to 700 rushing yards this year at USC. And he's just going to be a really great addition for Texas Tech and new offensive coordinator Mac Leftwich. That wasn't really the question because, like I said, he is getting the buzz. But I just really wanted to kind of highlight him because I think it's a huge pickup, for next season.
Especially with, I mean, Taj Brooks was so important to this team and vital to its success. And look, we had a ton of great running backs in the Big 12 this past season, and somehow he kind of flew under the radar despite being one of the best backs in this conference. It's hard when you've got, 6, 7, 8 backs that you could look at and go, best one of the Big 12, just run down this list. But he did, like we knew his name coming into the year. He still felt like he ran under the radar. So to have somebody with the talent that he has coming in and the opportunity there as well coming over from USC. Like that's a big pickup that I get it. It's a running back. We have other running backs. That's not the position that everyone's like, fix this. But I think Joyner has a big opportunity in Lubbock to make a name for himself in 2025. Looking
Agreed.
at looking at the roster, let's look at Texas Tech because there's it's hard right now if you want to be optimistic to not look at what they're doing in the portal, look at the Leftwich hire and say, yes, Texas Tech should be one of those teams who's considered a contender in a way too early scenario as we talk in December. We haven't even made it into 2025, but we're still, that's how our brains work. We want to try and project ahead. What in your mind, looking at a still unfinished roster, could hold this Texas Tech team back from reaching that goal of Arlington next December?
Yeah, great question. I think, we talked about the offensive line additions. I still think that could really be the thing that if it doesn't click, if the new guys don't gel, if the guys returning, they don't mesh well with the incoming guys, that could be what holds them back just because that's been a problem in Lubbock for years now. They've you look at the last couple of years, they've added offensive line transfers. Maybe not as highly rated as these guys coming in this year, but it's kind of just been it's not been a position of strength for Texas Tech, even though they've had NFL guys going over the years like Terrence Steele and Jack Anderson and Dawson Deaton, and they've had, talented guys come in, but overall, it just hasn't been good enough. And then that combined with, I think everyone's super excited for Mac Leftwich, super excited for new defensive coordinator Sheil Wood as well. But anytime you replace both coordinators, there could be a transition period. We'll see how all that meshes. But, I would say just having all those changes and then with the coordinators and then offensive line too, that could be what holds them back.
What's left for Texas Tech? Obviously, players are going to continue to enter the transfer portal. There's the spring window as well. So the rosters are far from set for next season, far, far from it. As you look at where Texas Tech is at this point, what do you feel like is left for them to say, here's our focal point? Here's if we're going to go bring in more players. And obviously roster sizes are going to change drastically next season as well. It's just something we got to keep an eye on with the change from down to 105 players. But what's left for Texas Tech here? What is their focus on now?
Yeah, not much. I will say a couple spots, maybe another defensive lineman. I know we've talked about that position quite a bit, but they do have Jason Jenkins from Tennessee. He's set to visit next week, and he was a rotational guy at Tennessee who graded out really well. Obviously, a college football playoff team. So I think I saw today he's also visiting North Carolina and Florida State. So some good competition for his services. And then maybe, a slot receiver type. They've added one receiver in the transfer portal, Reggie Virgil from Miami of Ohio, but he's more of an outside guy. He's 6'4", 190. He is a deep threat, but you look at kind of the roster and the way it stands, there's not too many slot types on the roster. So I wouldn't be surprised if they look to add a more of a shifty inside type of playmaker on the offense.
I don't mean to put you on the spot here, Ben, but there's been a lot of conversation on social media in regards to the Big 12 and the transfer portal and how players are ranked and rated, right? We see guys who out of high school were 4-star and stayed as a 4-star rating through by being at a Texas or an Ohio State or an Alabama. And then they leave and they transfer to a Texas Tech or a BYU or a UCF, and their rating and their grading is changing. And so there's a lot of frustration with Big 12 fans right now, feeling like the system is working against them. Because when you look at the way that some of these ranking systems, as far as strength of schedule and things that impact who makes the playoff and how your team is judged, is based off of how your roster is graded and rated and perceived. And so there is some, and I think some validity to the frustration of, it seems not right to say these guys, this roster is this and this roster is this, but as soon as they leave those and they come to us, some of these players are inferior. I'm just curious your thoughts, or if you can share any insight on how kind of the rating system works when it comes to transfers, and help shed some light to maybe offer some clarification for Big 12 fans as to whether or not there's some, maybe their thoughts and opinions are just a bit, I don't know, just sour milk.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll preface this by saying that I cover recruiting for Red Raider Sports, which is the Texas Tech side for Rivals, but I have zero input in rankings, especially transfer portal rankings. I report on them. They don't ask, for my opinion on the rankings.
So
So
don't come after Ben. Don't
do
he's not in
not, yeah,
charge.
do not come after me. And I've seen that that discussion online. I think BYU got a linebacker from Texas whose ranking dropped quite a bit in the portal. Yeah, I think it's valid. I share those similar concerns, and so It all comes down to like production, right? If you're look at Texas Tech, Texas Tech is not a blue blood, but they get an offensive lineman from Illinois State, Hunter Zambrano, but his transfer portal ranking is, he's great. He's one of the top 25, 30 ranked kids, and that comes down to he's had these years in college, he's been an FCS All-American, he's produced, and so I think that justifies that type of ranking. And if you're the kind of guy who you were highly ranked in high school, but you've been around a couple of years and you haven't done much, I think that's kind of what those portal rankings are based off of. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid concern that fans have, and I don't know what the answer, to the problem is, but I just think that rankings are kind of based off what you've done, especially in the portal.
So I have thought about this because of this conversation, and I want to you're gonna be the first person I'm gonna kind of pitch this thought to, of it feels like you get your rating out of high school, and whatever that rating is sticks as far as how those players are viewed while they are at their first school of choice, and they are not reevaluated until they enter the transfer portal and need to be reevaluated to decide how this player should be judged for his next school. And if we're going to continue to preseason judge teams based off of the classes that they brought in and how those players were rated a year ago, 2 years ago, three, without any having done anything in college, if that's going to be a part of how we grade whether or not teams are good in the preseason, which does have an impact throughout the year, it does, fair or not, it does, that there's got to be some way to reevaluate rosters throughout the year as though players are entering the transfer portal, right? Like
Yeah.
I think it's fair because I think the NFL does that. We look at players and how they did it last year, and then we can judge that roster. And obviously, there's a lot more teams in the FBS than there are the NFL, but how we judge teams entering each season in the NFL is based off of what we have seen, right? We've seen them play or we haven't seen them play. And it's hard in college because you got a lot of kids moving around. It's more rosters. You haven't seen the freshmen, but I do have to think at some point we've got to, I don't know if you want to regrade them, but find a way to reevaluate rosters each offseason based off of new data, as opposed to, well, he's a 4-star kid. He was a 4-star kid in the class of 20. I see that when you get guys, anytime there's a kid who people they talk about on Twitter, who the former 4-star has entered the transfer portal from this school and is now committing to this school. I'm like, okay, what are his stats? Like, if you don't include his stats and you tell me he's a former 4-star kid, I'm supposed to get excited about a kid who was a 4-star 3 years ago. But if you're not telling me his stats, what does that actually tell me about him? What are your thoughts on and I know it's such a complicated concept to come up with, but everyone kind of doing a better job of evaluating players and rosters throughout the offseason, as opposed to just, congrats, that was a 4-star 3 years ago, and we're just going to keep considering him that way.
Yeah, I think what you're questioning is kind of the value of preseason rankings and how that do we need those, how they decide who makes the college football playoff. I guess you make great points. I think college football playoff rankings come out like week 8 or 9 or 10 or whenever that is later in the season. And those do factor in what also, like you said, what we thought of as players from their high school, but it also considers the season more instead of just, hey, preseason ranking, you're in the top 10. And by the end of the year, you lost a game or two, you're no longer going to be in that conversation. Take a BYU, for example, who goes 10-2 and then doesn't have a shot at the college football playoff. I think that's wrong. And that's just because their guys weren't highly rated out of high school. Again, a great question. I don't know if we need, I think the preseason rankings are more for fans and for fun, but they do matter, unfortunately. And yeah, man, I don't know what the fix is. Again, I think there was a lot of noise coming out of the SEC this year. I think, win the games on your schedule. You don't have to worry about that. I didn't want to hear anything from Alabama or Ole Miss or anything like that because they have everything in their benefit already. And yeah, man, they lost the opportunity. So yeah, it's interesting. I think you look towards next year. Texas Tech is hoping to win their bowl game against Arkansas, and then go into next year receiving some of those preseason accolades and rankings, which will help them. So, we'll see because it definitely matters. And for now, as long as that's the system, that's how coaches should look at it and try to game it however they can, because that's ultimately you're trying to get into that playoff.
Ben, man, I really appreciate your time. Great insight here. Great stuff on Texas Tech. And you do a great job covering Texas Tech, especially when it comes to recruiting all year long. Do me a favor, for those who want to check out your work, where can they find it?
Yeah, RedRaidersports.com, Texas Tech rivals. So, hop on there. It's not just me. We have a great team. So we would love to have you join if you're a Texas Tech fan, or if you're even a Texas Tech hater. We love our haters too. Come check us out.
Looking like no message board is worth itself if it doesn't have a few haters in it, right? Can't
Correct.
no successful message board is just full of everybody pumping sunshine. Ben, again, thank you so much, man. It's a fun off season for Texas Tech. It really does feel like it's a fun one. Love to see them getting the buzz that they're getting, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and start buying my Texas Tech stock for 2025. It feels like I should do it now before the price starts jumping.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. They have a very manageable non-conference schedule, 7 home games. So, it's all set up for them to have the type of success they want to have.
I have done a bad job of covering all 16 teams in the Big 12 conference, like we say at the intro of this show. And please forgive me to everyone if you feel that your team has been shortchanged, because there's 16 teams in this conference now. Okay. I'm doing the best I can. And even I am aware that teams are falling through the cracks throughout the season. And so, you know what? I wasn't going to do a new episode until mid-January. And you just sometimes you get the itch, I assume this is what it feels like to have an addiction that you can't quit. And my addiction that I can't quit is Twitter and Big 12 sports, and talking about it into a microphone that I know some of you out there will listen to. And so one of those teams that I've done a very poor job of staying on top of is our Houston Cougar brethren. And so joining me today from the Scott and Holman podcast, our show in the 1012 network, is our good friend Bobby. Bobby, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you very much. Glad to be back. I think this is my second appearance on the show, so maybe third. But glad to be back and ready to talk Houston Cougar sports.
I'm like
Everything
doing
runs
mental,
together after. Yeah, it all
I,
runs together after a while.
I'm usually good like if it's their first or it's not their first, and after that, you're just a friend
You're
of
on
the
your
pod.
own.
So
You're on your own.
you're welcome to track. I can't. Uh, I want to dive into a few different things because there's a lot going on with Houston Cougar athletics, and we'll talk a little football here in a minute. But I want to start on basketball because conference play gets rolling on Monday. Your Cougars will be facing my Cowboys to kick things off Monday night in Stillwater, between one of the better teams in the Big 12 versus one of the not better teams in the Big 12, to be fair. Though I will say this for Oklahoma State, I like the Steve Lutz hire. Having watched most of the games so far this season in the non-conference, this is a far more fun team to watch than the past few years. There's actual like ball movement and offensive sets and things that we're just not used to seeing, like shooting free throws effectively. And so I have my feelings on Oklahoma State and how this season might go in year one for Steve Lutz. But I'm curious. I want to talk about Houston because Houston is a team we have very high expectations for, like many of the teams in the Big 12. And I would say at this point, look, there's a lot of conversation about the SEC because anytime any major media network gets the opportunity to talk about how great the SEC is in anything they do, and the SEC is perceived to be the best conference in men's college basketball so far this season, just based off of record and who they've beat and yada, yada, yada. And I'm not going to argue against the metrics from Ken Palm or anybody else because the Big 12 does feel down at the top this year. It does feel a little bit down. Houston being one of those teams at 8-3 and still ranked in the top 25, where you go, it's not that they have losses where you go, I can't believe they lost to that team. It's that they've lost. It seems like they've lost the games to all the teams that you go, I can understand losing to that team. Whereas we're more used to a Houston team that like isn't going to lose to San Diego State and to Auburn and to out. Like they would have gotten one of these. So what are your thoughts on this Houston team as now that non-conference play is done and Big 12 play is about to begin?
First off, thanks for having me once again. We appreciate it. We love being a part of the network and everything. So, but just to kind of start here, um, you see the 3 losses and you go, "Ooh, that's not good." But then you see who they're against. Auburn. Everyone's lost to Auburn this year.
Yes.
The Alabama San Diego State games. I'm somebody who hates blaming the refs. But to get those games into overtimes, there were some calls. I am always of the firm belief of don't put it in the referee's hands. Like when you blow teams out, the refs don't matter, right? When you make your shots, do things like that. So I hate using that as an excuse, but those 2 games might not get into overtime without a little bit of assistance there. Late calls there to kind of hurt what ended up happening in those games. But overall, I think this team is really, especially in that Auburn game, and you saw it a little bit in that Alabama game, really trying to figure out what they are doing. You lose somebody like the guy who's on my shirt right now, Jamal Shed. You lose one of the best players in program history, not just it. I would definitely say one of the best players in this modern U of H that we've seen over the Kelvin Sampson era. I definitely would say he's one of the top, if not the top players in that area. You lose him, it's hard to replace that. You bring in Milos Uzan, you don't really know what's going to happen with him. You see things that you like, but when you bring in a new ball handler to control the offense and do things like that, it's going to get really, you're going to have some growing pains. And I think that's kind of what has happened with Houston a little bit this year is for the first, I would say up until probably this Toledo game, maybe the Troy game, you saw a lot of who was going to be that guy who just kind of, you could put the ball in his hands and he'd go get you a bucket. That's what Jamal Shed was, right? I don't know how far back this was pre-Big 12, but Rob Gray was that kind of guy for this U of H team back in the day. Like that guy who the other team's on a 10-2 run. Who do we give it to take one to the basket, draw the foul, pick it up, and do that? We didn't really have it. And we're starting to see more and more that Emmanuel Sharp may be that guy. While he's not a guy who's going to drive to the lane and really get you that bucket like that, you can put him in the corner and you can work an offense to get him the ball for a wide open 3. And it's going to be that momentum killer for the other team. And so I really see stuff like that kind of going down and this team kind of finally starting to get its feet underneath it. Now, I'm also somebody who will also go, yeah, I say that, but we did it against Butler, Troy, Toledo, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. It's when you're the number, the number 4 Ken Palm team and you're playing no one in the top 50. It's easy to say, yeah, we look like we got our feet underneath us. But you look at a 28-point win against Butler, 20 against Troy, 29 against Toledo, and 36 against Corpus Christi. Yep. You tend to see a little bit of those are more of the U of H kind of results that we expect against really poor teams.
Yeah, look, it's either wins by double digits or losses by 5 or fewer points.
Yep.
To good teams, right? To a Auburn who looks like they might be the best team in the country so far, an Alabama team that has a really good resume based off who they have also played and beaten, and a San Diego State team that has a solid 10-2 team. Like none of the losses are bad from an opponent standpoint, and they're all close losses. It's not like any of the really good teams blew Houston out. They're all just like you would hope to have gotten one of those, and then everybody else is double-digit win, double-digit win, double-digit win, double-digit win, double-digit win. So it's not like to me, it's not like, oh no, Houston's taking some massive step back. It's how do we get from the Houston that we expected to probably maybe lose one game as opposed to all three of against the best opponents to where they are now. And so it's obviously, I don't think the gap between what we were hoping Houston would be and where they are is a large gap. I think it is finding the little things with a newer roster to get them back over that hump. And you enter into Big 12 play. Like I said, we open again Monday against Oklahoma State on the road. Then it's BYU, TCU, on the road at Kansas State, West Virginia at home. It's not the most, and don't get me wrong, I like BYU. I think they're a sneaky good team this year with a roster that's only going to keep getting better. It's not a murderer's row to start conference play either. And so What do you want to see from Houston that makes you feel like things are going in the right direction here in the first few weeks of conference? Because, like you said, they've been blowing out mid to bad teams for the last few games of non-conference. That's what you want to see. You should blow those out. You shouldn't be struggling against them. Now you get Oklahoma State, who might be the worst team in the Big 12, as I mentioned, on the road at OSU, BYU at home, TCU at home, on the road at Kansas State, home for West Virginia. Until the schedule ramps up into late January, you're getting your Kansas and your Texas Tech. What do you want to see from Houston that says they are starting to make the steps that we want to see, where they are, instead of losing by 5 to Auburn and San Diego State, they're winning by 6 and 7?
Yeah, I think Sam and I always say, my co-host on the podcast, we always say that like any road win in conference, whenever you travel, a win by 1 is really good. Get out of there. Be excited that you got that road win. That being said, if we go in and we beat Oklahoma State by 1, it depends on how you look, right? If you go out and you're having a cold night, or Oklahoma State comes out on fire, right? You guys shoot 60% from the field. It's kind of like, what were we doing? Were you guys making shots? I think I want to say it was 2 years ago when we played Miami in the NCAA tournament, and Miami was making them from like 40 feet. It was like, this is ridiculous, right? sometimes the other team, I always joke, I'll say this joke occasionally, those guys are on scholarship too, in the conference. But I think the biggest game leading up to, like you said, late January, the next month, the games you're really going to want to pay attention to, obviously, are going to be BYU and West Virginia. Those are 2 top 50 KenPom teams. The only other 3 top 50 KenPom teams that you've played, you've lost to. So BYU, they can get hot from beyond the arc and can make you pay pretty quick. They're averaging 86 points a game. It's you got to kind of watch that, but the Cougar defense, great as usual. So, what I really want to see is what the rotation looks like. That's kind of been something we've been watching all years. What does the rotation of this team look like? And you have Wani Roberts, who missed the last game. He participated in practice, but Sampson is saying that he's not 100%. Well, last game against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, we went 4 guards to start the game. And then you start, I want to say it was Tugler. Did we start Tugler? I can't even remember. Time flies when you're having fun, guys. But, but so you start one big man, you can't do that against Kansas. Sam kind of texted me. He was like, kind of a hot take here was that he kind of liked it. And I said, I understand liking getting scores on the floor, but against Kansas, I don't see how well that goes playing one big against Kansas, so I want to see what that rotation looks like, and then I'll know if we're doing well by how LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp do. If those 2 guys can keep putting the ball in the bucket, I'm going to be pretty happy. And then obviously one of the most important things with this U of H team is always going to be health. This U of H team is notorious for getting hurt late in the season. And I think that comes with the nature of a Kelvin Sampson team, right? You have these very intense practices, and it builds this culture where no one gets on the court before a U of H player. No one is diving for a ball before a U of H player. There's been videos of practice where they just throw the ball out and the players are clawing at each other, going at it. It's awesome. It builds a culture. It gives you extra possessions. It helps you win games. But at the same time, you wonder what that wear and tear does to some guys. We have Wani hurt. We had another guy go down with a hurt hand that he's getting surgery on. It's just kind of like that he hurt in practice. And you see a lot of injuries happen under Sampson in practice. And it's kind of like, can we get to March healthier than we have before? I think I said in our preview of the season is, I am, with the way the depth of this team looked heading into the season, I felt pretty good. But the other thing I wanted to say was a number 1 seed is great. I would love a number 1 seed. Who wouldn't? But if you told me I could take 95% of our roster healthy and I was a 3 seed, I'd rather have that than be the 1 seed.
Yeah, I like that mindset. I'll take health over seeding any day of the week. That BYU game, it's not going to be ranked on ranked, but the BYU game on January 4th, pulling up the CBB analytics graphs, I mean, BYU's metrics are good, folks. Offensive, defensive rating. They don't. Nobody does better defensive rebounding than BYU in the Big 12 at all. Like it's that's a game to watch. That is absolutely a game to keep an eye on. And I mean, look, it's the Big 12, folks. Every game is a game to keep an eye on.
Every game's a tough game.
Like, I don't want to hear about the SEC and blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. Top to bottom, Big 12, always. Let's talk a little football. Houston, obviously, not going bowling.
We're not.
I said this. I can't remember what I have said, like on Twitter or versus Bluesky versus past podcasts versus just having conversations with people over the holiday. So if I've said these things already, it's fine. Every podcast is someone's first. Not every 6-6 season is created the same. Not every 5-7 season is created the same. Not every 4-8. Every season you have to take things into full count. And based off of expectations for Houston Cougar football heading into the season, I think it is fair to say that in year one of Willie Fritz, they are ahead of what we all thought the schedule would be for them. Going 4-8 doesn't sound great, but going 4-8 and going 3-6 in conference play and winning some of the games they did and being competitive in some of the games that they were, I think is really important and really impressive to look at. Again, like they could have beat Oklahoma earlier in the season. They were in a competitive game with Baylor late in the year. Yeah, they got blown out in some games. Yeah, they got shut down in some games. The offense was inconsistent at best. But you have to feel good about a Houston team that did get 3 wins in conference play, was competitive in games, and looked like it made strides, especially on the defensive side of the ball as this season went on. Just helicopter view. We all know that Willie Fritz is a program builder. And the question was always going to be, how long will it take him? It took a little while at Tulane to get things rolling. Part of that's just, I think people like, it took him forever to get to those 10 wins. It's like, that is such a dumb outside, no lack of understanding about what the Tulane football program even was, a resource or anything before he got there. So let's not act like he walked into Louisiana or Troy. He went to Tulane. Okay. Tulane. They didn't care until they started winning with him. So Houston cares. Houston has more resources. How do you feel about where this Houston football program sits as they work through the offseason preparing for year 2?
Yeah, me personally, preseason, I think if you go back, I promise you I'm on the record saying this, the record may be the same as what we saw with the previous regime. What I would tell you is the record may be the same, but is it better football? That's what I was judging this year. And there are places in our fan base that thought we should have had a better record. I knew we wouldn't. We struggled against teams last year. Like our first Big 12 victory happened because of why? A Hail Mary. We shouldn't have won that game. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Let's be introspective and go, okay, you probably should have won that game. How do you win the Baylor game? No, you win the Baylor game because you go for 2. If you don't make that 2-point conversion, it comes down to 1 play again, right? Now you're looking at a 2-10 team with no Big 12 wins. You kind of go, Willie Fritz made us much better this year. Willie Fritz made us a better team this year. Does the record show it? No. And I know there's the classic Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are. And it's tough to argue with that. But at the same time, if you look just a little bit deeper, you'll see this is a better team. This team was better. This defense went from one of the worst in Division I to like top 50. If you look at like advanced statistics like SP Plus, I want to say we're like number 50. We're top 60 for sure. So like,
it was a good defense.
It was a very good defense.
There's a reason that the under hit like every week this season for Houston outside of 2. And yes, the offense had something to do with that, but the defense was a big reason that like even when they were getting blown out, it wasn't
even
like
when you lose by 20 to a good Iowa State team, what happens? You scored 0, but you held them to 20.
The most points anybody put up on Houston was 42. That happened one time against Kansas. Kansas was coming off the auto week. They started figuring things out. Like the defense did a good job this season. Like, it was an impressive, and not just like a, hey, good. It was a good defense, period. Stop. End of story.
Yes. Yeah. And so you have the defense, the offense was ugly. Like there's nothing, there's no other way to say it. You get Donovan Smith out of there. Zion Chris is a little bit better, but You have Connor Wegman coming in, and that's tough not to get really excited for him to come in. A guy who has shown that he can throw the ball. Not that we've seen that before. I mean, you go back, you look at his career stats. That 2023 year he had at A&M. That's a good year, man.
Yeah.
Quarterback rating of 156, 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. I think he just needed a change of scenery. And the biggest problem with this offense this year, if there's nobody yelling it from the mountaintops, it was me. Might have made some people mad. I gave a lot of our quarterback play a pass this year because of how awful our offensive line play was this year. It was horrendous. I posted multiple pictures on Bluesky or Twitter, whichever one I was on at the time. I can't even remember. And
it gets so confused.
It's all a blur. And then they look identical too. So it's like, oh, wait a minute. So there are pictures where there are 3 offensive linemen on their face. Not planned. It wasn't one of those like tricky little screenplays where they all fall to the ground and then get up and run. No, they are on their face, facing the wrong way. And Donovan Smith is running for his life. The Cougs do that and then bring in, I want to say 5 offensive linemen in the transfer portal. I think Willie Fritz knew it was a problem as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 offensive linemen. Fritz knew it was a problem as well. So hopefully if that offensive line play gets better, you add Connor Weigman and the defense continues to be where they were. That was kind of a joke Sam and I had, was if this defense had last year's offense, we probably would have gone 6-6 because we would have gotten a little luckier with some of the bounces. We think, some of those non-conference games, maybe you pull them out, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you don't lose to Rice.
We got Matthew Wyckoff from Cal. We've got Jason Brooks from Oklahoma State. We love interconference transfers. We've got Mackenzie Agnello
we got
from
3 of
New
them.
Mexico. We've got Alvin Evasel from Baylor. We love interconference transfers. That is the rule here in the D12. I look on Weigman, like, I get if someone's like, there's a reason he left A&M. He wasn't that good. He is an upgrade over what you had. And I get frustrated sometimes with fans whose expectation is like, he's not the best player with no flaws. And you're just like, is he better than what you had? Is he an upgrade of what you had? Cool. That's the whole point. That's the point of the portal, is that everyone's not going to get someone who's going to come in and immediately just like take you to a national championship. The rule with the transfer portal, I keep saying this, a 50% success rate on your transfer portal class is an incredibly successful transfer portal class. Okay. That is just the reality. If half your transfers will work out and deliver on what you hoped and the coaches thought they would be, that is successful, because it is not like high school. There's not long-term building up relationships, although there's relationships that have been there longer than you realize. That's why some of these kids pick the schools they go to. But some of them, you don't have a lot of tape out of college. Some of them, you don't know how they're going to fit with your roster. Some of them, their interaction with things aren't like, people have unrealistic expectations, I think, sometimes on transfer portal, and you just don't know. You don't know. Just like you don't know if that 3-star out of high school is going to be awesome, is going to be a diamond in the rough, or the 4-stars, never going to see the field and end up at another school, and maybe he'll do something there, but probably not.
It happened with Tech this year.
Yeah,
and their wide receiver
Hutton's off to A&M, and it's like, I know they're disappointed, but also like, he didn't do anything. And you can say it's the coaching staff's fault. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Who knows? And so like, I like Houston getting Weigman. I think that is a good land for them. I think they've done a solid and commendable job in the transfer portal with what they have been able to bring in so far. Obviously, there's some guys who left that you would have loved to have seen stick around. I like Justin Benton. Manjack was a solid enough receiver. There's guys you wish could have stayed, but I think they've done a solid job. The question then becomes defensive coordinator. Obviously, he is off to Texas Tech. Who's the new DC? What are our thoughts on him?
Yeah, so we brought in Austin Armstrong, who was the defensive coordinator at Florida. Now, you see, we took a defensive coordinator from an SEC program. You get pretty excited about it on first look. But Florida didn't have the best defense, not this past season, but the season before. They bring in another guy to kind of call the plays, and suddenly that defense gets better. So they kind of bring someone in to kind of help Austin Armstrong. And they suddenly get better when he's not calling plays. So that's a little concerning. But for the U of H budget, for all that, this guy, Austin Armstrong, was, one of the youngest DCs in the SEC history. If you're doing enough to prove that you are good enough to get a spot on Saban's staff at Alabama, you're good enough to get a DC job, even if you didn't do 100% very well at it, that still shows that there's something there, and enough people who know football better than I do and know coaching carousels better than I do think you were good enough to come work for them. And that sounds pretty good to me. Do I think it's this? Would I have preferred to keep our old DC? Yeah, absolutely, I would have. But Tech is going a little crazy with some of their NIL money and some of the fundraising that they're doing right now. They are spending a ton on the transfer portal. They are spending a ton on their coaches. Didn't they do something with softball, like a softball player as well? I feel like they
Kennedy is getting she's the high
they're going crazy money. So it's like
you got it. What else you gonna do with it?
Yeah. And so, if you're gonna pay him that much, it is what it is. We're not there yet. We still don't get Big 12 full share. I always say U of H lost a generation of supporters, and that generation of supporters were when we got not chosen for the Big 12, when Baylor did their dirty work behind the scenes. That's right, Baylor fans listening. We don't forget, okay? But they did what they did on the back end, right? And
how does it also feel being Baylor's at best fourth rival? Is that because there's the Butt Bowl, there's the rivalry. I'm not calling it the other thing. Every Texas team thinks that they have a rivalry with Texas.
Yes.
And then, of course, because Baylor and A&M used to play. Are you guys fourth rival now with Baylor? I don't know that.
I don't even think we're that high. I don't even think we're that high, just because they have TCU. I would say TCU's their number one rival.
Yeah, the rivalry. Yeah. Not the Bluebell Bonnet.
Not the Bonnet Bowl or whatever they call it, the Blue Bonnet Bowl.
Sure.
I think that's number one for them.
Yes,
I think,
and then the Butt Bowl.
Yes, but I don't think the Butt Bowl back in the day when they shared a conference, A&M Baylor was huge, because my last 2 years of high school, I lived in the Waco area, and I remember because this is when they were bad too. They beat A&M, and there were shirts all over Waco about the battle on the Brazos, all this stuff. I remember it everywhere. They were losing their minds for beating A&M. So A&M was a big one, and they're only separated by an hour and a half. I don't think it's as big now, but
I gotta get Joe in here. And okay, I've just discovered that's it. I have decided on off-season to-do list, and it's actually getting somebody from each Big 12 team. So let's just start here now that I'm going to completely divert this away.
Let's go
from a topic of necessity. I'm going to start my Google spreadsheet here while we chat.
Rivalries.
I want to know, in your opinion, as someone who is a longtime Coug fan and someone who sits and talks about the Cougars on a podcast, because there's no one knows more about it than someone who devotes their time to doing that. Who is Houston's number one rival?
Okay, so that is actually my least favorite thing about being a Cougar fan.
Because it's Rice?
No, it's not Rice. It is. I hate losing to Rice, but we don't have one. And that sounds very lame to say.
No,
not because we're better, but because who did we share a conference with? I mean, the team I hate more than anything, and I hope they lose every game every year, is SMU. I despise SMU with every part of my being, but we're not in a conference anymore. I think if SMU were in the Big 12 or we were in the ACC for whatever reason, I think that would still be a big rivalry, because we're so opposite, right? You have Highland Park, SMU kid, Third Ward, Houston. So you have the Houston-Dallas rivalry, plus you have the haves and the have-nots, right? Where SMU can go join a conference and say, we don't need any TV for 10 years. Like they got that kind of money. So like there was always that I hated with them. But most Cougar fans that are older than me, and this goes back to that whole lost generation of Cougar fans.
Sure.
Say it's Texas, right? Because every team in Texas, to your point, but we're not even on their radar. We never have been. Even when we were good in the 80s, like they want to beat A&M, they want to beat OU, they'd rather beat Tech. They like, and then when the split happened, we didn't have anybody in our conference that we just hate. Like, how can I build a rivalry with East Carolina? I don't know anybody from East Carolina. Like, and that's just like, I don't know Tulsa. I hate Tulsa. I hate. Holy moly, my freshman year of college is just a fun little story. We took a road trip from Houston to Tulsa. It's like a 10-hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
2007, they beat us 56-7. 56-7, and the 7 was in garbage time. Like we got shut out. And if I had to hear them say Golden Hurricane on the other side one more time, I was going to lose my mind, and I get physically mad anytime I go into Tulsa. And then for work, another funny story, last year I traveled to Tulsa. I have bad luck in the city. I traveled to Tulsa. It's like 2 degrees. It's freezing cold. I get dinner. Nowhere's open because there's ice on the ground. It's snow and everything. So like there was one restaurant open. I think it was a Chuy's. Chuy's was open. I go get Chuy's. I go back to my hotel room. I go to Target. I get a cookie just to like give myself a treat because it's freezing cold. Go to my hotel room, set my stuff down. Fire alarm starts going off. I'm like, all right, I had to go downstairs. The water main breaks to my hotel. It is gushing in my hotel room. I have to gather my stuff, go to a different hotel. I hate the city of Tulsa with every part of my being. I hate the city of Tulsa. But in terms of a football rival or sports rival, we just don't have one. Like, I know it sounds weird to say, but I would say it's SMU or Rice. I mean, Rice is... We hate losing to Rice, but it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, losing to Rice sucks, especially in football and basketball. I've always considered of the Big 12 teams like Texas Tech, not because they think we're a rival back, but when we were in Conference USA and all that, they were the only Big 12 team that would play us in football. And so Oklahoma State would as well. Yeah. And so like, but I went to one of the games and they were the nicest fans in the world. The Oklahoma State fan. It was the Crabtree year. I think Crabtree. No, Des Bryant year. And y'all were ranked like number 3 in the country or something.
Yes, I'm aware of 2009. Right? Thank you.
Everyone was so nice. I wanted everyone to be so mad at me, and everyone was so nice. I was like, how can I hate you guys? Like, I wanted someone to throw a beer at us. Like, curse me out. Like, we just ruined your season. Hate
all
me.
you had to do is drive about an hour 15 south, and that'll be taken care of for you. No, like the idea, like we don't have a rival, and I get it. It's not, you're not being pompous. It's just there's not a team that there is this established rivalry. I mean, because the only one I could think of is Rice, and
yeah,
like I get the whole like one-sided. I think in college sports there are fewer true rivalries than we actually realize, for a variety of different reasons, and because again, conference realignment is nothing new. It's part of college football for generations and years. Just because it doesn't always happen at the P4 level doesn't mean it's not always happening on a constant. And so it's interesting to me that Houston, like, because you could look at the AAC days and be like, okay, well, it's UCF, but like UCF thinks is like Florida, but Florida's not really a rival, but they just don't,
and their rival's USF.
USF, would anyone want to play? It's like, and you could argue that Cincinnati UCF was more of the AAC rivalry than Houston with Cincinnati. And then the reason that Texas Tech doesn't have an annual rivalry game in the Big 12 was because they offered Texas Tech and Houston the opportunity to do so because they were only going to do in-state rivalries. And Texas Tech was like, nah, we're good.
It doesn't benefit them to play us, right? That's why that's what took us so long to join the Big 12. What good do the other Big 12 teams get out of playing us every year?
Nothing. And I don't mean that bad. Like, I'm happy to have Houston. Yeah, it's fine. But like, it's another Texas.
You risk giving us, and you give us legitimacy. Like, if we come in and we start beating, look at our basketball program, right? We go on the Big 12, we win it. And now we have the number 2 recruiting class in the country. Not that we weren't recruiting well before, but now we play in the second best conference, third, depending on where you look, either way, right? You just gave us legitimacy. And that's why everyone didn't want us in for a long time. And I totally get it. It's not, again, not saying that you've awoken a sleeping giant or something like that, but we're in fertile recruiting ground. And you look at the transfer portal. Most of the guys we get are guys who lived in Houston, went away for college for a year or two, and go, I kind of want to be back home, but I can still play high level football.
Yeah. All right.
Who would you say Oklahoma State's is now that OU's gone?
I mean, it's still OU. They just don't play. OSU fans will talk about Tulsa the same way like West Virginia fans will talk about Marshall and Houston fans will talk about Rice. There's always that like inferior rivalry, but it's a rivalry game. Like it is. I'm perfectly fine with it. It's close proximity. And then if there's a Big 12 rivalry, even though they won't call it one, it's Texas Tech. Like the two fan bases that dislike each other, but also don't hate each other. It's one of those like we all think this should just be a rivalry game. Like that's
how I feel about TCU.
That Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, like I think Texas and RAD worked at Texas Tech, and it's the Red Raiders and the Cowboys, and we either call it the Red Dirt rivalry or the Dust Bowl, and I like Dust Bowl because Red Dirt sounds too much like Red River, which is funny because then it's the knockoff Red River, which would just give OU and Texas so much fun the opportunity to try and like, you guys named it something with red too. We're all like, yeah, because we called it Red Dirt because Red Dirt's good music, and we would do like, and there's so much potential there with the Big 12 being the Big 12, but I think it's Texas Tech. Like it is Texas Tech.
Makes sense
to me, but like it's OU. I mean, it's OU, and then I think it's Texas Tech, and I think it's Tulsa. That's it. Like and it's fine. Like that's it. I mean, I love Iowa State. I love playing Iowa State. It's always insane games. I like playing Kansas State. It's always insane. I think it's funny, like now as an Oklahoma State fan, the more I talk to, and then I talk to Iowa State and Kansas State fans, there's the 4 Big 8 schools who are still in the conference, and we don't count Colorado because they left and they tried to come back, and it's kind of like, it's
like your ex coming back, right? It's like, okay, hold on.
Except
we need to have some serious.
But it's kind of like they came back, but they like married like your uncle, and so it's a little bit weird to get back into the family, because they had to come in with Utah and Colorado. Yeah. So, anyways, like there's this like everyone's kind of tighter than those 4, and it's like can we play Kansas State and Iowa State it's interesting, but I would say OSU, it's Texas Tech of teams they will play annually, except OSU and Tulsa now play like every year in non-con. There's like they signed an 8-year deal that kicked off this year, so for the next 7 years Tulsa's on the schedule. I'm fine with it. Okay, so for Houston I have written down Rice in order: Rice, SMU, Texas, Tulsa, Texas Tech, and we will continue to discuss this list.
I like this season. I like this.
I do too. I love when ideas spontaneously come about that I can then run with, because this is going to be a good off-season content. People are going to argue with it. So if you're listening to the show and you want share your thoughts, we'll put the graphic out. Y'all tell me what you think, yay or nay, and I'll make sure Bobby's tagged so you can all yell at him about it. Bobby, please yell at me. Bobby, it's always a pleasure, man. Do me a favor. You guys do so much covering Houston, and every one of the reasons I like you guys so much is you're not just doing football or football and basketball, is you cover everything. I mean, absolutely everything. The whole thing on softball this summer was, you guys did an incredible job with that. So you guys do such a great job of covering all of Houston athletics. So do me a favor. For people who want to get more on Houston, be they a Coug or a Big 12 fan or just someone who wants to go hate read, where can they go and do so?
Yeah, if you have a sickness like Phillip and I do, and you want to know all about every Big 12 school because you have nothing better to do, I guess, you can find us on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. We refuse to call it X. We're not over there as much as we used to be, but you can find us at SH Podcast. We actually were getting blocked on some of their links for our downloads for whatever reason. They said it like contained malicious content. So we have moved over to Bluesky. So you can find us at PAWD cast social.bsky or bsky.social. That's it. If you search podcast, PAWDCAST, you will find us on on Bluesky over there. And then anywhere you find podcasts, search Scott and Holman Podcast, PAWD, once again, because it's a cougar paw, and so we call it a podcast. PAW. You guys get it. So that's where you can find us, anywhere you get your podcast: Spotify, iTunes, Google shut down podcasts, so I don't even know where you get podcasts on Pixels anymore, or Samsung. So just go to Spotify.
Man, I love Blue Sky. I do. It's old Twitter. And I mean that as a compliment.
Once I started curating things a little bit more, it started to get a little bit better.
Well, I found instructions on how to make a feed. And so one of my goals for the next few weeks is to actually make a Big 12 feed, because there's not one yet. And I need a good Big 12 feed that feeds in all Big 12. Just all the different various Big 12 hashtags and Big 12. I'm gonna make one, because by golly, if we aren't the Big 12 #1 podcast network, I don't know who is. So Bobby, always a pleasure, bud. Everybody go check out Scott and Holman, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, man.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Have a good one.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.